They called us subsentient, a polite term for property. One by one, the species of the Galactic Accord voted Earth into slavery. Not conquest, not war, just a decision, a vote. And we lost everything. They came in silver ships, blinding light, alien tongues trying to sound like law and diplomacy. They didn't fire a single shot, just rolled out documents, a treaty, a sentence, a future rewritten without our consent. Humanity is to be integrated into the Accord as a labor class species. That's how they phrased it. Clean, legal, sanitized. The vote passed 782 to 0. Not a single species stood for us, not one. Even the ones who used to trade with us, who smiled in our faces, who called us partners and friends. They all stood down when the council forced the decision. And we went silent. The first generation of Earth-born slaves didn't scream, didn't riot, didn't die in fiery resistance. We obeyed. We marched into their factories, their mines, their terraforming stations. We bent our backs and broke our spirits, or so they thought. I was 11 when the chains wrapped around my father's wrists. I watched them drag him onto a Fenari freighter with 10,000 others, engineers, mechanics, welders, miners. My mother was deemed genetically inefficient. Her bones were too brittle. She was euthanized within 6 hours of processing. And me? They threw me into a Sector 9 holding camp. For indoctrination. For obedience. They trained me to fix their machines. But every time I touched a circuit, I learned something new. Not just about their tech, about their weaknesses, their arrogance, their patterns. They never expected us to adapt. They thought humans were fragile, emotional, prone to collapse under pressure. They didn't realize that we were watching. All of us, across thousands of systems, every broken man, every beaten woman, every orphaned child. We remembered. They beat our bodies. But they never broke our memory. I met Cade on a Varnathi fuel rig, 3 years into my servitude. He was missing an eye and half his teeth, but he could dismantle a fusion core with bare hands. He told me something that stuck. They're not afraid of our guns, boy. They're afraid we might stop believing we deserve the leash. That was the moment it started. Not rebellion, not yet. But awakening. We started hiding parts, smuggling out knowledge, encrypting messages in repair codes. Whispers spread like wildfire. Project Goliath. Phase 0. Extinction debt. They didn't notice. They were too busy praising themselves for a peaceful integration of Earth. They put us in their history books under civilized assimilation. Liars. By the time I was 20, I'd built my first virus. It crawled into the Fenari logistics systems and fed them false inventory for months before they noticed. Sabotage was easy when you were invisible. When they didn't even bother to learn your name. By 25, I was running a unit. 3,000 humans spread across 6 systems. Technicians, code breakers, engineers, every one of us a ghost in the machine. We didn't want a revolution. We wanted retribution. We didn't want treaties. We wanted extinction. The first strike wasn't loud. It was surgical. We vaporized a Quarnix data archive. Not just the servers, the people too. Everyone who had ever voted yes on the Accord's integration of Earth. Burned them with their own defense grid. The second strike was on Uxal Prime, the Fenari breeding labs. No survivors, not even the larvae. They called it terrorism, but we called it balance. And that's when Earth stopped hiding. Every signal across the galaxy lit up with the same words. We remember, we rise, we repay. The extinction debt had come due. They called us infected. After Uxal Prime went dark, after our encoded message cracked every comnet in their perfect, organized galaxy, they didn't call us rebels. or soldiers, or even terrorists. Number infected. Like we were a virus. Like humanity had morphed into a disease too dangerous to contain. They weren't wrong. Because once we stopped begging for freedom and started engineering extinction, we became something else entirely. No more protests, no more diplomacy. Only calculation, strategy, fire. The Galactic Accord scrambled. Meetings, panic, armadas on standby. Planets went into lockdown, security checks, drone surveillance, biotagging of all human slaves, DNA tracking implemented overnight. Too late. They didn't realize we'd been planning this for 30 years. The virus was already inside their networks, their systems, their people, and we had names, faces, coordinates. Cade always said revenge was best served with precision. That's why we didn't carpet bomb cities. We didn't attack civilians. No, we went for the architects. We went for the ones who signed the vote. I led Unit Thorn. 12 of us, all born in labor camps, raised by machines and pain, molded by fire. We were the quiet ones, the ones who never screamed during the whippings. Because we were learning, studying, and now we were executing. Our first high-value target was Threx Ulnovar, a Vernari diplomat turned corporate overlord. He owned 3 mining colonies on Theta 3, each filled with thousands of humans working under gravity pressures designed to liquefy organs over time. Slowly, efficiently. They called it economic optimization. I called it murder in slow motion. We didn't assassinate Threx. We made a statement. Threx died inside his own zero-grav pleasure chamber. We reversed the polarity of the artificial gravity system and locked him inside. He screamed for 22 minutes before the emergency failsafe systems crushed his skull against the ceiling. We filmed it, broadcast it to every channel on the Accord. The message underneath was simple. You created us, now choke on your creation. Some species began to panic. The Relari voted to cut ties with the Accord. The Yexari proposed a conditional release of all human laborers. Too late. Too late. We weren't fighting for rights anymore. We weren't humans anymore. We were the last breath of vengeance echoing across the void. Earth's surface had been scorched after the vote. They called it a compliance purge. They said it was to neutralize uprisings. In reality, they turned the planet that gave birth to us into a test site to study psychological endurance of species under extinction-level stress. They studied our will, our pain thresholds, our breaking points. But they never thought to study our anger. Because when the ashes cooled, Earth was not dead. We were building, beneath the crust, in bunkers, under oceans. Old factions, military remnants, scientific enclaves, rogue colonies began aligning, and when they finally looked again, Earth was no longer a charred memory. It was a launch pad. We renamed it Fort Wrath. Our fleets didn't look like theirs. We didn't build sleek silver starships with polished wings. We built war barges, ugly, black, jagged monsters, cobbled from salvage and blood and pain. Our flag? A human skull with the chains of the Accord broken across it. They thought we were primitive. We proved them wrong in 36 hours. That's how long it took Operation Black Dawn to erase an entire star system. Not through nukes, not through fleets. We dropped a terraforming virus designed by a rogue human biologist who spent 20 years in a Quarnix lab pretending to be loyal. The virus liquefied the atmosphere. It took exactly 3 hours for the sky to boil and the oceans to turn acidic. We left one survivor, a diplomat named Jatu. She begged for mercy. We told her to deliver a message instead. Return every human body, or we will turn your stars into cinders. By now, some species wanted out. They tried to bargain, offer apologies, return colonies. We didn't accept, because for every one of us they took, For every father whipped, every daughter sterilized, every boy broken in a re-education camp, there was no forgiveness. We weren't killing because we had to. We were killing because it was earned. One of our sleeper agents sent me a transmission from Corridon Prime, the political hub of the Accord. The same council chamber where the vote was passed. They were calling us a threat to galactic civilization. They still didn't get it. We weren't just a threat. We were the consequence. Unit Thorn was ordered to take down a new target, Dravari Tal, architect of the Accord's behavioral conditioning protocol, the same program that broke human minds and turned rebels into obedient drones. He operated out of a hidden medical facility orbiting Delcar 4. We didn't strike from orbit. We infiltrated. We walked in with forged badges, dressed in stolen Accord medical uniforms. And when we reached the core lab, we forced him to activate his own restraint chair. "You know why you're here," I told him. "I was following policy," he said. "It was—" I sliced his tongue before he could finish. Then I injected his spine with the same compound they used to pacify children during slave onboarding. He spent the next 42 hours paralyzed, eyes open, brain aware, while we showed him video after video of his own experiments, but with him as the subject. And when his heart finally gave out, we uploaded the entire event to the Accord archives under a new file. Human Justice Protocol, number 0032. Each strike we made had a name. Each target was archived, logged, ranked. We weren't a resistance. We were a reckoning. But war takes a toll, and not all of us made it. Cade was hit during the extraction from Tal's lab. A railgun round tore through his abdomen. He didn't scream, just looked at me and smiled with blood in his teeth. "Don't waste this. Make it hurt." He died 2 minutes later, clutching a detonator. We left him behind, with the whole station rigged. He took 500 of them with him. I didn't grieve. I didn't have time, because the next phase had already begun. Earth had built a weapon. Not just ships, not just soldiers. Something ancient, buried beneath Antarctic ice since before the collapse. We called it Project Leviathan. Some said it was a remnant from the old Terran defense network. Others believed it was something more. Part machine, part alien, a hybrid the old governments had hidden away. We just knew it could destroy entire moons. And we now had it online. We sent a message to the Accord. A direct transmission. My voice, no distortion, no disguise. "You voted to enslave us. You used our blood to build your civilization. You turned Earth into a testing ground for your cruelty. Now, we burn it all down. This isn't war. This is the debt being paid in full." They responded by sending a fleet. 12 capital ships, hundreds of fighters, drones, cruisers. We met them at Kepler's grave, an asteroid belt where old Earth colonies once mined rare minerals. We let them come. Let them surround us. Then we triggered Leviathan. The blast didn't just destroy the fleet. It tore a hole in subspace, collapsed a gravity well, and erased the sector from navigational charts. Millions died. We didn't lose a single ship. After that, the Accord stopped pretending. They called for emergency protocols, military unity, a holy campaign to purify the infection. But it didn't matter, because by now every system had a human cell. Every colony had sleepers. Every Accord system had rot in its heart. We weren't hiding anymore. We were everywhere, and we would not stop. Not until the last species who signed that vote looked into the fire and understood. Humanity was not a race of victims. We were the storm they birthed through arrogance. We were the end they bought with silence. We were the extinction debt made flesh. We never intended to survive this war. We didn't need to. We just needed to end them before they buried the last memory of what it meant to be human. And we were doing it. One system, one species, one execution at a time. The Accord had finally stopped pretending we were a minor threat. They declared galactic martial law, issued purge orders, and reinstated military doctrines not seen in 1,000 years. They called it the Sanctum Directive, a full-spectrum annihilation protocol. We had a name now, the Scourge of Earth. They painted us as monsters. But they were the ones who voted for slavery, who ripped children from their mothers, who pumped drugs into our blood to kill our will. They made us dig the graves of our own people, then called it integration. So we embraced the name. We became monsters. Because monsters don't beg. They don't negotiate. They devour. After the Leviathan weapon erased Kepler's grave, we started hearing whispers from deep space black channels, places only mercenaries and smugglers communicated. The whispers were fear, panic, rumors of human ghosts riding death ships through abandoned mining belts, colonies being wiped out without a trace, entire planets losing power, oxygen, life, without a shot fired. That was us. We'd activated the Silence Protocol, a fleet of unmanned drones programmed with one mission: cut the throat of infrastructure, choke oxygen, drain heat, lock escape. We didn't always kill with bullets anymore. Sometimes we just let them freeze in the dark. And it worked. The Accord began eating itself. Supply lines failed. Communications collapsed. Trust between species, already thin, fractured. The ones who once voted as one were now hoarding resources, accusing each other, blocking border access. Paranoia spread like wildfire. Some tried to surrender. We never accepted. Because we weren't looking for surrender. We were delivering final judgment. We had a list. Every Accord species that voted yes on the slavery motion was ranked. The top 5 were prioritized. We called them the originals, the architects of our chains. And now we were coming for their homes. First on the list was the Vernari High Worlds. Their core planets were wrapped in orbital fortresses, shielded by a military fleet that had enslaved half the galaxy for generations. No one had ever breached their defense ring, not even during the Great Expansion War. We didn't breach it, we bypassed it. 2 of our units, Ash Spire and Nightmaw, infiltrated the Vernari water system months in advance, using tech stolen from a forgotten Terran biolab. They inserted gene-triggered nanoviruses designed to lie dormant until activated by a specific frequency. That frequency was broadcast through their planetary symphony network during their day of ascension. 5 billion Vernari choked to death as their own water turned into acid in their lungs. We didn't celebrate. We sent them a final message. Water, for the tears of every child you turned into a miner. This is balance. They never replied. Because they were all dead, word spread faster than light. The Accord issued a new classification for humans, Extinction-Level species. They finally told the truth. Because we were. We'd stopped being a race. We were an event, a singularity, and we still weren't finished. Next was the Kalor Dominion, masters of psychological warfare. They used to break human soldiers by making them relive their worst memories in dream loops. Some men were stuck for years, decades, reliving death, betrayal, torture, a weaponized prison of the mind. We sent them our own dream. We hacked their simulation grid, injected a memory file encoded in human pain. It wasn't a virus. It was reality, footage, screams, memories. A data package made from every atrocity committed against us, every broken mind, every suicide. They thought they could manipulate the mind? We buried them in truth. The grid overloaded, their entire planetary AI fried from the inside. 8 million Kalor fell into permanent neural comas. We called it poetic silence. Then we moved on. The galaxy was dying by inches now. Not just from us, from collapse. trade routes gone, borders vanished, famine, disease, old rivalries resurfacing. The Accord was unraveling, and Earth stood untouched, not out of fear, out of respect, out of terror, because every species knew we weren't trying to win a war. We were settling an account. I stood on the bridge of the Obsidian Maw, our primary command vessel, watching the black void of space swirl with the distant glow of burning colonies. Behind me, the crew worked in silence. Men and women who'd grown up in camps, who'd watched their loved ones dissected, vaporized, or vanished without trace. No uniforms, no ranks, just shared rage. They followed me not because I gave orders, but because I never asked for forgiveness. I turned to Rek, our systems commander. Born underground in a bio-slave pod. Raised by code and pain. Status? Next target prepped, he said. Zaldan core worlds, vote sponsors, propaganda lords. Transmission? I asked. He nodded and tapped the console. A moment later, a dozen holograms flickered into view. The faces of Zaldan ministers, half of them still in denial, trying to hide behind procedures and diplomacy. I stepped forward. You helped enslave a world. You built your cities on our bones. We are not coming to liberate your people. We are coming to end your legacy. They begged, offered negotiations, even reparations. I cut the transmission. Rek spoke quietly. Still want to finish this? I looked at him, at the scars across his jaw, the mechanical eyes they forced into him after blinding him in an experiment. Yes, I said, because mercy was for the old world, and Earth was not part of the old world anymore. We were the last truth in a galaxy built on lies. And this truth had a name. Extinction. We launched the attack that night. The Zaldan fleet was massive, more than we'd ever faced before. But they still fought like the galaxy made sense, like war followed rules. We didn't. We jumped behind their formations, used gravitational singularities as weapons, crashed asteroids into their fleet formations. Then we unleashed Void Hounds, our AI-controlled hunter ships, designed to lock on to command vessels and shred them from the inside out. They never stood a chance. By morning, the Zaldan homeworld was gone. We didn't nuke it. We redirected their own sun with a gravitational beam. They boiled in daylight. And we didn't stop to watch. Because another name was next on the list. And after that, another. Until all who stood silent were silenced forever. The void was quieter now. Not peaceful, just quieter. That kind of silence only comes after something has been broken too far to make noise anymore. It had been 6 years since Earth launched the first wave of retribution. 6 years since the Accord made their final vote, the vote that rewrote humanity's place in the universe as a thing to be owned, consumed, bred for labor, and discarded in silence. And now the Accord didn't exist. Of the 782 species that voted for Earth's enslavement, less than 70 remained. Half of those were in hiding. The rest were in orbiting tombs, planets stripped of air, fleets turned to drifting skeletons, cities left in absolute stillness. And yet we weren't done. I stood in the war chamber of the Black Spire, our deep space command vault buried inside the core of a hollowed-out moon. Every wall hummed with silent data, target streams, AI kill probabilities, and extinction status updates. We didn't call them battles anymore. We called them cleansings. Rek entered the room. He looked worse than usual. Pale, gaunt, eyes twitching from too many nights spent awake in simulation chambers. They've gone dark, he said quietly. Who? The Hilary Collective. I turned slowly. Another defector? Number not defection. Obliteration. Something hit them. Hard. It wasn't us. I raised an eyebrow. No trace? No message? Nothing? He nodded. Just a wall of static. The entire sector's gone black. Communications, traffic, energy signatures. Like it never existed. My gut twisted. That didn't make sense. We'd left them for last. They were the most cowardly of the originals. Cowards who voted yes, then ran to the edge of the known systems the moment we started burning their allies. They didn't fight. They didn't beg. But now, someone beat us to them? Maybe it's internal, Rek added. A civil collapse. I stared at the console, then leaned in and accessed the Hilari dossier. They were archivists, not warriors. Passive manipulators. Their influence ran deep, not through violence, but through memory. They rewrote history, silenced victims, controlled truth. They were the ones who deleted Earth from the universal database, the ones who ensured no species ever remembered what we once were. When a child born on a distant planet asked what human meant, they were told, nothing. A classification error. That was the Hilari's work. And now they were gone? I didn't like that. We were supposed to end them. Because vengeance only matters when it's personal. Send a recon unit, I ordered. One ship, silent jump, no broadcasts. Rek hesitated. We've got other targets queued. The Shali syndicates, they can wait. He didn't argue. Nobody argued with me anymore, because I was the last one who remembered before. Before the vote, before the fires, before we stopped being people and became something else. I wasn't a soldier anymore. I was just momentum. The next 3 days passed in simulation briefings, code updates, genetic warfare tests. We had labs working on memory erasure toxins now, compounds designed to wipe the cultural identity of species before we killed them. Some said it was excessive. I disagreed. They didn't just try to kill our bodies. They tried to erase our existence. We were just making sure they never got another chance. When the recon unit returned, they didn't speak for 45 minutes, just uploaded footage. We watched in silence. The Hilari world was gone. Not bombed, not vaporized, just missing. The planet was there, but the cities were dust. Every building melted, every satellite shattered. No signs of battle, no energy weapons, no radiation, just carbon. And thousands of skulls stacked in spirals across the dead plains. Symbols, written in something close to ancient Terran script. Crude, primitive, but human. We took back the truth. That was all it said. Nothing else. Rek stared at me across the table. One of ours? I wanted to say no, but I couldn't. There were hundreds of human factions now. Cells that splintered off from our command. Radicals. Fanatics. Some no longer answered to Earth at all. They didn't want to punish the Accord. They wanted to replace it. Possibly, I muttered. Or something worse. Because that's what this war was doing to us. The more we burned, the more we rotted. We weren't just killing monsters, we were becoming them. And yet, I didn't stop. Because when I closed my eyes, I could still hear my mother scream as the sterilizers took her. Still see my father's face, covered in coal dust, coughing his lungs out in the Fennery labor tunnels. Still smell the blood-soaked learning mats where children were taught to submit before they were taught to speak. I remembered. And memory is the only fuel vengeance needs. That night, I stood alone on the observation deck of the Black Spire, watching a storm roll across the gas giant below. And for the first time in years, I felt cold. Not in my skin, in my soul. What would we do when it was over? When the last name on the list was crossed out? When the last target begged, and there were no more blood debts left to settle? Would we stop? Would we know how? A low chime echoed across the deck. Priority message. I turned to the console. Not an enemy broadcast, not coordinates, a voice transmission, from Earth, a real-time feed. I hadn't heard from Earth Command in months. I opened the channel. It was General Bram, head of Leviathan Control. His face looked thinner, eyes sunken. The war had aged him, or maybe guilt had. His voice was quiet. We have a problem. I didn't speak. There's been an incident in the Pythos cluster. A rogue human fleet. Not ours? I asked. Number independent cell. They took out 3 Accord worlds. But this time, they didn't stop with the military. He paused. Swallowed. They executed civilians, children, live-streamed it. My hands clenched the edge of the console. Why? Because they believe we're being too merciful. Silence hung heavy between us. They've started calling themselves the Red Dusk, he added. And they've declared war on Earth. I stared at the screen. So it had come to this. Our vengeance had fractured. Too many fires, not enough control. We'd created a generation of warriors who only knew hate, not purpose. Now, Earth, the mother of this fury, was under threat from its own children. We'll handle it, I said. Bram's eyes met mine. Make it clean, fast! I cut the channel. I stood there for a long time, heart pounding, silence pressing in. Because this was the cost. This was the truth behind Extinction-Level fury. Once you unleash the fire, you don't get to control where it spreads. I walked back into the command room, and the crew looked up. They saw it in my face. Something had changed. Not the mission, not the rage, but the target. This wasn't just about the Accord anymore. It was about saving what was left of us before we turned on each other completely. Because vengeance is a weapon with no safety switch. And now, we had to point it inward. We always thought the last war would be against them, the ones who voted, the ones who watched us suffer and called it justice. We never imagined it would be against our own. But here we were, on the brink of another war, and this time, the enemy bled like us, spoke our language, shared our scars. The Red Dusk weren't aliens. They were born in the same slave camps, raised under the same boot, trained with our tactics, taught the same rage. But somewhere along the way, they stopped believing in vengeance and started believing in annihilation. They didn't just destroy Accord colonies. They didn't care about votes, architects, targets, or guilt. They burned entire bloodlines, killed civilians, babies, erased cultures. Because to them, survival of anyone not human was a threat. Even Earth. They claimed we were weak for stopping at justice, for choosing surgical strikes instead of genocide. They called me the Mercy General. Let that sink in. After everything I'd done, all the blood I'd spilled, mercy, because I didn't wipe species clean, because I still drew a line. Red Dusk didn't have a line. They had a countdown. When Earth Command intercepted their encrypted transmission, the message was short. Earth has gone soft. You spared the Whipmasters. Now they multiply again in shadow. We're finishing what you never had the stomach to start. Join us, or burn with them. That was the day Earth officially declared Code Blackfall. Authorization for preemptive termination of all Red Dusk fleets, assets, and personnel. A civil war written in the same blood we'd spent 6 years spilling. But this time, the shame was ours. Their first strike came fast. Outpost Sigma-4, a remote human refueling station orbiting a dead moon in the Quran Drift. It wasn't military. It wasn't offensive. It was just a sanctuary for rescued laborers, mostly elderly, some children. Red Dusk vaporized the station in a kinetic impact strike. No survivors, no warning. We found a message etched in the debris. No more weakness. No more ghosts. When I saw it, something in me snapped. I gathered the command unit. Thorn. Record my inner circle. The ones who'd been with me since the days we scavenged tech from garbage heaps and ate insects to survive. I told them the truth. This isn't a mission. This isn't vengeance. This is a culling. We tracked the red dusk signal to a rogue war barge called the Eternal Ash, last seen crossing the Gamma Divide, an uncharted rift filled with subspace storms and gravitational anomalies. They were hiding where the laws of physics barely held together. We followed. The trip cost us 2 ships and a dozen men, shredded by wormhole collapse and plasma surges. But we reached them. They weren't hiding. They were waiting. The Eternal Ash drifted silently near the collapsed remains of an old Accord dreadnought, a graveyard of twisted hulls and frozen corpses. And from that wreckage came their signal, a live broadcast. A man appeared on screen. Human, my age, eyes full of blood and conviction. "Hello, brother." I didn't recognize him, but he knew me. "I watched you," he said. "Back when you cracked the Accord's throat, when you dropped the Hilary Sun, I followed every strike, every message." He smiled, teeth cracked and yellow. "You inspired us." "I'm not your hero," I said coldly. "Number you're a warning. You stopped too early, left the rot alive." He stepped aside. Behind him stood children, red dusk cadets. 10, maybe 12 years old, all armed, all emotionless. "Your mercy cost us everything," he said. "We gave them a second chance, and they've started rebuilding, new treaties, secret pacts. It never ends." He leaned in. "We won't make your mistake." I ended the call. There was no point talking. You don't argue with a wildfire. You extinguish it. We launched the assault at midnight ship time. Obsidian Maw led the charge, flanked by 2 Hammerhead cruisers and 5 drone pods running interference patterns. Our objective: disable the Eternal Ash, breach the core, capture leadership. Alive. Earth wanted proof. Proof that the Red Dusk were operating beyond command protocol. Proof to justify extermination. I didn't care about proof. I wanted to bury them with their message. But war doesn't follow clean paths. They were ready. The Eternal Ash didn't open fire immediately. It split. A false hull collapsed, revealing a second ship. Crimson Wake, twin design, bristling with experimental rail turrets and stolen AI defenses. They had Earth tech. They had our own blueprints. How? Easy. We taught them. They were us, just twisted by fury we couldn't leash. The first volley hit hard. 2 of our cruisers lost engines in the first 10 minutes. A drone pod spun out into the divide and was swallowed by gravity shear. I rerouted power to the Maw's forward batteries. "Bring us close," I ordered. Rek hesitated. "That puts us inside their kill box." "Exactly." The Maw wasn't built for defense. It was built to close distance and rip open hulls with point-blank plasma lances. And that's what we did. We punched through their outer deck, boarded fast, left the hull burning behind us. Inside, it was hell. Red Dusk soldiers didn't fight like Accord troops. They didn't retreat. They didn't panic. They sang. As they fought, as they died, they sang an old Terran tongue. Something between a hymn and a war cry. "Fire cleanses, fire freeze, ash to ash, on broken knees." We lost 12 men before we reached the core chamber. When I kicked in the final door, I found him. Their leader. The man from the broadcast. He wasn't armed. He stood there, hands behind his back, surrounded by children with rifles. "You came," he said. I stepped forward, weapon raised. "You used Earth's pain to justify murder." He nodded. "And you used Earth's chains to justify letting murderers live." "I killed them all." "Not fast enough." He tossed a datapad at my feet. Footage played. Accord remnants, still active, still trading in flesh, hiding, regrouping, behind the scenes. Your mercy gave them time. I felt something twist in my gut. Not doubt, recognition. He wasn't entirely wrong. We'd spared a few, hesitated in the name of decency, tried to rebuild something. And maybe we'd let some snakes slither away. But this slaughter of children, civilians, sanctuaries, this wasn't justice. This was decay. I stepped closer. The kids raised their rifles. I spoke quietly. You're not saving us. You're poisoning us. He smiled. Number, I'm saving what's left of us. Then he pressed the detonator. The explosion didn't kill us. I'd already rerouted Ma's AI to isolate their core and shut down most of the blast. But the eternal ash burned. We dragged what we could back to the ship. None of the children survived. And I sat there, alone in the med bay, staring at the broken face of a man who once believed in what I believed in, until he believed too hard. Rek sat beside me, quiet. We didn't talk for a long time. Eventually he spoke. Do we keep going? The question hung in the air. Because now it wasn't just about enemies out there. It was about us, our people, our future. The line between justified wrath and madness. I looked down at my hands. Scarred, burned, tainted with 1,000 deaths. But they were still my hands. And I wasn't done yet. We kill the rest of the Red Dusk, I said, fast, without spectacle. Rek nodded. And after that? I looked out the viewport. Where once there was war, now only questions. Then we go home. If it still exists. If we still know how. The last Red Dusk fleet was caged inside the Meraxis Fold, a collapsing neutron storm 40 light-years across. Nothing entered without being shredded by gravitational coils. But they weren't hiding from us. They were hiding from themselves. After the eternal ash burned and their fanatic leader blew himself apart, the rest of Red Dusk fractured. No more unified code, no orders, just chaos held together by shared hatred. But not just of aliens anymore. Of us. Of Earth. Of anyone who hadn't sunk as deep as they had into the belief that only extinction guaranteed peace. We intercepted dozens of broken broadcasts, frantic calls, scattered war chants, even sobbing confessions from Red Dusk officers trying to abandon the cause. Most of them ended with a single sound, a gunshot, or silence. And yet, their fleet remained. 20 ships, all stolen Earth tech, all running hot and wild, all pointing their weapons back at the planet that made them. Earth. My home. The place that started it all. The one thing we'd spent years protecting. Now they were coming to burn it down. I stood in Earth Command's last war chamber, deep below the Greenland crust shield, where the old Earth Defense Network had been reactivated after the Accord's fall. Massive iron walls lined with satellite feeds, atmospheric scanners, and the weary faces of those who'd survived not just a galaxy of enemies, but a lifetime of betrayal. I looked at Bram across the room. His uniform was faded, but his stare still carried weight. He tapped the table once. They're making their final move. I nodded. Full assault? Not yet. One ship. A message vessel. What's the message? He pulled it up on the central screen. A Red Dusk officer stood, gaunt and shaking, blood caked on his armor. His voice was hoarse, but steady. We are not here to conquer Earth. We're here to free it. Free it from what? The transmission asked. From you. The screen cut to black. I turned to Bram. This ends now. We deployed at midnight, cloaked under the magnetic interference of the fold. 5 vessels. My elite squadron. No reinforcements. No escape plan. We weren't going to fight for hours. We were going to cut the head off the snake before it writhed its way toward Earth's atmosphere. My ship, the Warborn, punched through the rim of the storm first. Every gauge lit red. Hull pressure fluctuated. Our AI had to reroute power every 60 seconds just to keep the engines from imploding. And still, they waited. The Red Dusk Fleet hadn't moved. They just hovered in the eye of chaos like ghosts begging to be exorcised. We got close. Too close. Their lead ship, the Griever, powered up, but instead of launching weapons, they opened a direct channel, and this time, a child answered. 12 years old, maybe. Eyes cold, voice calm. Earth doesn't deserve to rise. Earth watched for too long. Earth forgave, and in that mercy, the rot returned. He was reciting, not speaking. I could tell. He was repeating the mantra of a man already dead. The old Red Dusk leader. They'd turned his final recordings into scripture. And now, the child said, we offer you a gift. The screen cut again. All 20 Red Dusk ships began heating up. Not weapons. Reactors. They were going to detonate themselves inside the fold. Trigger a cascade reaction. A neutron wave capable of pushing straight through subspace and into Earth's orbit. It would burn our atmosphere off in minutes. No survivors, no species, no memory, just silence. I looked at Rek across the bridge. They're sacrificing themselves to erase Earth. He said nothing. Because there was nothing to say. We had 2 minutes to act. No missiles could intercept in time. No EMP could reach them through the fold's distortion field. We had only one option. Board. We launched jump anchors directly onto the Griever. Only 5 of us made it aboard. The halls were dark. Metal hissed underfoot. Blood smeared across walls like ink in zero-grav. No guards, no opposition. They wanted us to come, wanted us to see. And what we saw nearly broke me. The ship's core had been transformed into a temple, not religious, ritualistic. Children knelt around a fusion engine humming like a heart ready to explode. Each had a number carved into their cheek. Each held a detonator. And at the center, in a suspended chamber, floated the source of it all. A cloned brain. Old, decaying, but still alive. Connected to wires, filters, speakers. It was him, the original Red Dusk leader. He hadn't died on the eternal ash. He'd uploaded part of his consciousness into this final weapon. When we entered, his voice echoed through the chamber. You made us in your fire. Now we return it tenfold. I raised my weapon, ready to fire into the core. But Rek grabbed my arm. He pointed. The detonators. They weren't real. They were triggers, psychological. Each child had been programmed, conditioned. The second they sensed fear or hesitation from us, their neural implants would spike and activate the real detonation through the core. It was bait. We had to walk through hell and not flinch. I stepped forward. The first child looked up. Tears in his eyes. But no expression. Just acceptance. He didn't hate me. He didn't know me. He just knew obedience to the message burned into his head. I dropped my weapon. Unarmed. Vulnerable. I reached out and placed my hand on his shoulder. He blinked. For the first time, he flinched. Rek moved behind me, disrupting the neural pattern with a frequency blaster tuned to Earth biosignatures. Each child twitched once, then slumped, alive, unconscious. The moment passed. The timer on the fusion core stopped. We shut it down. Earth lived. We returned 2 days later. The last of Red Dusk had been erased from the stars. Not by fire, but by truth. The recordings we recovered, proof of child indoctrination, brain cloning, cult-like grooming, were transmitted to every human settlement. The movement lost its soul. And Earth? We stood in silence for a long time. No parades, no celebration, just a shared ache. For what we'd done, for what we'd allowed to fester. The galaxy was silent now. The Accord was dead. The Red Dusk was ash. We had won. But at what cost? The line between justice and madness blurred so many times, I wasn't sure we'd ever find it again. In the quiet that followed, Bram approached me, his face worn, hands trembling. He offered me something, a coin. Old, scarred, Earth currency, long extinct. On one side, the Earth emblem. On the other, scorched fire. "The First War," he said softly. "Back when nations still existed, they minted these for soldiers. One side for home, the other for what we became to protect it." I took it. Held it. He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. We buried the coin in the soil of what used to be New Chicago. And beside it we buried every weapon we didn't need anymore. We didn't forget. But we chose not to carry the fire forward. Because vengeance can only live so long before it becomes hunger. And Earth had starved enough. Peace isn't quiet, not real peace. Real peace comes with whispers, with the creaking weight of everything you burned still echoing in the dark. It doesn't come with parades or clean hands. It comes with faces, the ones you remember, the ones you can't forget. I stood over the ruins of old Frankfurt, once a supply node for the Accord's eastern expansion routes, now little more than charred metal twisted into craters. What little wind moved through the broken spires carried ash and salt. We had fire teams there, cleaning up debris, neutralizing leftover radiation, cataloging bones. Bones from both sides. Red Dusk, Accord, civilians. No enemies anymore, just remains. Rek knelt next to an exosuit half buried in dust. "You know what I hate about Aftermath?" he said without looking up. I didn't answer. "It feels more permanent than the war." He stood, holding a fractured helmet in his gloved hand. One eye socket was melted in. "At least during the fight you're focused, alive, purposeful, but this is just decay." I didn't disagree. But I didn't say much anymore. I'd led 1,000 strikes, orchestrated the collapse of star systems, stood face to face with men who saw genocide as a goal, and now I struggled to give orders to rebuild a food grid. Because leadership in war is fire and instinct. Leadership in peace is uncertainty. We had councils now, attempts at something like government again. Earth was split into quadrants, each assigned to reconstruction corps. Most settlements were starting to stabilize. Greenhouses reopened, children reappeared in classrooms. But the fear never left. Because no one really believed the silence would last. And they were right. The first sign came from the Oort Wall, our long-range detection array sitting just beyond Neptune's wreckage. It hadn't pinged anything in over 2 years. Then one night, it screamed. Unidentified object. Not an asteroid, not human, and not Accord. It came through an old, collapsed worm gate, one we thought had been rendered inoperable after our orbital burn of the Solari drift. It drifted, not moving with propulsion, just watching. Every scan we sent returned nothing but static. No energy, no heat, no identifiable composition. We sent a drone. It never came back. We sent 6 more. Gone. Earth Command called it a ghost anomaly, a leftover machine from some dead race, a remnant of a war even older than ours. But I had seen enough to know better. Some things in the dark aren't remnants. They're witnesses. We activated Black Protocol again. Silent lockdown. Civilian broadcasts encrypted. Military posts reinforced without causing alarm. We didn't tell the world yet, because Earth had just started breathing again. And if we screamed too soon, the panic would kill more people than this thing ever could. But I didn't sleep. Instead, I returned to the one person I never thought I'd visit again. Dr. Talon Merrick. A name that, during the height of our war, would have been enough to justify an airstrike. Talon had designed the Leviathan project. She helped engineer the virus that cracked Hilari DNA and liquefied an entire species in 17 minutes. She was part savior, part monster. And after the war, we locked her away, deep beneath Titan's black ice. Not because she betrayed us, because she enjoyed the war too much. But now, we needed her mind. They unsealed her cell with enough guns to kill a city. She didn't flinch. She just looked up, smiled, and said, "Let me guess. You killed all your monsters, and now something's knocking on the door that doesn't bleed?" I didn't answer, because she was right. She walked slowly to the table, chained, pale, bones like twigs beneath her skin. "You think it's a weapon?" "Number, I think it's worse." She nodded once. "Then you need to stop acting like a general and start acting like a survivor. Because if that thing came through a sealed worm gate, then it didn't get lost. It was sent." She smiled again. "Exactly." We took her to the command bunker under the old Everest core. It was the only facility with quantum isolation deep enough to study the anomaly without alerting it. Talon studied the footage. Scans, debris from lost drones. Her hands trembled the whole time. Not from fear, from excitement. "It's not a probe," she whispered. "It's a test." "Testing what?" "Not what, who?" The scan data, what little we had, showed faint traces of gravitational signature manipulation, not just propulsion, positioning. This thing had matched orbit with the Oort wall. Exactly. Even our own AI navigation systems couldn't do that without drift. Talon zoomed in on the image. No lights, no propulsion trail. But now we could see it clearly. A shape, humanoid, bigger than any Earth soldier. Not metal, not bone. Something in between. "It's watching," she said, "to see if we're worth keeping." And just like that, we were no longer hunters. We were prey again. I sent a team, covert, fast, untraceable, to intercept the anomaly with a new approach. No aggression. Contact. Rek led the op. Still the only one I trusted with that kind of gamble. They boarded with a cold core shuttle, no heat signature, no weapons drawn. What they found made the war look like a training exercise. The anomaly wasn't a ship. It was a shell. Inside, wrapped in a web of neural threads and memory nodes, were hundreds of voices. Some human, some not. Whispers of every species we'd annihilated. Every war, every scream. Archived, spliced into one entity. An observer. And as Rek reached the central core, he transmitted one final message. It's not just watching us. It's learning what we are, and it's deciding what comes next. Then the feed cut out. We never got him back. The observer vanished from the Oort wall 3 hours later. No trace. Just a single marking etched into the satellite hull before it disappeared. Extinction is not vengeance. It is pattern. Now I sit beneath Earth's red sky, watching new towers rise over old craters. Children play again. Markets reopen. People laugh. But the sky is different now. Because somewhere, something knows our story. Not from legends, not from allies, but from our dead. It holds their voices. And it knows we were never just victims. We were executioners. Righteous, maybe, but merciless. And now, the galaxy may not fear us anymore. It may simply be preparing for what comes after us. Because extinction, as the observer said, isn't revenge, it's a pattern. And Earth may be next. I never expected peace to feel like suffocation. Not after everything we lost. Not after what we did to earn it. But as I looked up at Earth's blood-washed sky, saw the faint shimmer of orbital satellites rebuilt over our atmosphere, I realized something hard. We'd trained ourselves for war. We never trained to survive after it. For 6 years, rage was a compass. Pain was fuel. Now the fires were out. And all that was left was the smoke. and something in that smoke was watching us. We knew it hadn't left. The observer was gone from our scanners, but its presence hadn't vanished. It had changed, migrated, dispersed, no signals, no visible ships. But technology started failing without warning. Satellites drifted from course by inches each week. Drones returned with memory gaps, entire hours missing. Dreams started recurring across different cities, shared hallucinations among unrelated people. One phrase kept surfacing in all of it. It is not enough to survive. You must prove you deserve to. The pattern. The judgment. Bram called the last council into session inside Earth Core Vault 1, a chamber once built for nuclear retaliation, now repurposed as the cradle of our fragile new world. He stood stiff in front of the room, older, thinner, his metals dusty with disuse. We've rebuilt food chains, air, trade. We've turned soldiers into workers and warships into weather stations, but it may not matter. I said nothing. I was just there to listen. Because I already knew the real question wasn't whether we were ready to fight again. It was this. If the universe is holding a mirror to our soul, what does it see? And what would we do if we didn't like the reflection? One of the young administrators, a clean-suited idealist from the Pacific Resettlement Zone, stood up with shaking hands. We've done our best. We restored education, healthcare, communication. We shut down rogue cells. Isn't that enough? Bram looked at him. Enough for who? The silence was a sentence. That night I walked alone through what was left of old Sydney. Its skyline, once glass and steel, now half-covered in vines and digital mesh from atmospheric drones. People lived in its ruins now, rebuilt from scratch, families, children, laughter. But under that laughter lived something deeper. Fear. Because the observer hadn't just come to see what we'd done. It had come to see what we'd become, and so far, it hadn't spoken again. Which meant its answer might already be decided. Talon Merrick was the first to make sense of the silence. Still confined. Still watched. But we had no one smarter. She studied the observer's data residue, the trace particles it left behind. When I visited her ice chamber, she was smiling. Not her usual mocking smirk. Something else. Sadness, maybe. It's not going to kill us, she said. No? I asked. Number, it's waiting for us to do it. She slid a data slate across the table. Complex patterns, binary trails, echo loops. It's seeded something. I don't know what. But it's viral and it's elegant, biological, psychological. It's not destroying our systems. It's repurposing them. For what? To study how we collapse. Days later, the first fracture happened. A ship returning from Alpha storage orbit docked early. Its crew had changed, slightly. Their voices didn't match their logs. Their biometrics were close, but not perfect. And they didn't remember certain things they should have. We ran genetic scans. They were human, but not the ones who left. And when we tried to detain them, they simply stared. One of them whispered, "We are the version that passed. The test is not over." And then they vanished, not escaped. Vanished, no trace, no heat, no teleport signature, just erased. That's when Earth Command issued Protocol Greyfall, a full review of every returning expedition, every signal, every shipment of data. And one truth became clear. The observer had built a copy of us. Somewhere, somehow, not just of our soldiers, of our cities, of our decisions. It was running simulations, testing versions, and the one that survived wasn't necessarily us. We were no longer alone. We were no longer original. I gathered the few people I still trusted. Record Talon, a girl named Leo, who'd once led an information cell in the Eastern Crater Ring. And we went off-grid. No council, no command, because we knew what was coming. And it wasn't a war, It was a choice. We located the source of the data loops, the origin node of the observer's final broadcast. It was deep beneath the Mariana Fold, a chasm in Earth's crust formed when orbital weapons collapsed the seabed during the Red Dusk riots. There, inside the deepest dark Earth still held, we found it. Not a ship, not a machine, a mirror, smooth, black, 10 meters tall. It didn't pulse, didn't hum. It simply stood, waiting. We approached as a unit, unarmed, unmasked. When we stood before it, the surface shimmered, not with light, with memories, images of the war, every strike I'd ever called, every city we burned, every plea I ignored, every child we failed to rescue, every civilian I sacrificed for a target. It showed everything. Leo began to cry. Rek stood frozen. Talon smiled again. Ah, so that's it. What? I asked. It doesn't want to judge us. It wants us to judge. The observer wasn't here to punish. It was here to offer a final test. Could we live with what we did, without becoming it again? Because survival isn't just about not dying. It's about what you become when the dying stops. We didn't speak. We didn't run. We just stood there and faced it. And then the mirror cracked, not shattered, just one single fracture down the center. Light spilled out, and a voice, not in sound but inside us, whispered, "Your version remains unchosen, but the choice is yours. Choose peace and bury the fire, or choose memory and burn again." The light faded. The mirror turned gray, then turned to dust. We emerged from the fold days later, changed, not redeemed, not forgiven, but awakened. Because Earth didn't need another war, it needed to let go. So we returned. To the Council, to the cities, to the survivors. We told them everything. And for once, no one called for retaliation. No one called for weapons. They called for closure. And so we gave them one last ritual. We built a monument, not to the heroes, not to the victories, but to the monsters we became, to the ones who never came back, to the lines we crossed. It was forged from shattered starship hulls and data fragments. At its base were no names, only words. We remember not to burn again. And the observer? It never returned. Because maybe it didn't have to. Maybe it was never one thing. Maybe it was just the last test all species face. When your enemies are gone, who do you become? I'm older now. My bones ache. My scars hurt more than they used to. I walk the earth that somehow still turns. Children run past me. They don't salute. They don't know my name. And that's exactly how I want it. Because my legacy isn't a flag. It's a warning. We were betrayed, enslaved, burned. But when we stood from the ashes, we didn't just rebuild a world. We learned how not to become the thing we hated most. And in that, maybe we passed. Maybe that was enough.